next 10 years, we're really seeing about $182 million of debt contemplated by the CIP. The thing that I would note, was important for the council to know, is that based on the current analysis and the updated CIP, the city will start to approach certain debt limits and will need to actively manage its capital plan accordingly. The thing to keep in mind, and this is not an uncommon thing that we see with cities, especially looking out over a 10-year period, we know that some of these projects will happen, some of them won't happen, and some of them will occur in years that were planned, some of them will occur in years that they weren't planned. And so we do just like to note it as something that the council should be aware of, because ultimately you don't have the legal authority to borrow money in excess of your statutory debt limits. And it'll be something that will have to be actively managed over the next 10 years or so. And probably another reason, to Jen's point, to update the plan on a significant basis to monitor how the CIP interacts with your plans, and then of course the needs and then the deadlines. So when looking out over the next couple of years, these are some of the major capital costs for the city. I would note these are city costs only. So you can see the interior pool surfaces, the capital projects related to Main, Broadway, and 18th Streets. There's also a stormwater component to that. Public safety facilities, which we've talked about, some more streets in 2027, and then we do have some more costly vehicle replacements, particularly a fire engine in 2027, and then some additional stormwater projects in 2027. The thing I would mention when you look at that public safety number, that is a number that Ellers has adjusted the cost of the project by, assuming that it would take another year, so we applied an estimated annual inflation pending that reverse referendum and possible referendum of the community. This has not come from the architects or engineers. I imagine they would have an opinion if the project were to be delayed and what that would look like, and they would furnish you with the cost. But again, for the purposes of our planning, we did estimate something, not quite knowing how that was going to unfold over the next few months. So I just want to make that very clear, because I know there is some sensitivity about the cost of the project, what does it mean, some numbers are bandying around here and there. This is just an estimate that we included for financial planning purposes, much like we would for any other capital project that was pushed out another year, we applied it. So looking at the capital project fund themselves, over the next decade, $186 million in capital projects, so almost $20 million bucks a year currently planned. That is supported primarily by bond issuance. $36.7 million related to the annual street projects, and then $68 million, as you know, for the safety facilities. Property tax levy at this point in time, as the council may recall, it was reduced in 2026 to about $249,000. We're actually recommending as part of this plan that it increases to $600,000, and then increases annually until 2035 up to $1 million. And that's primarily to pay for smaller capital projects that are better candidates to be cash financed rather than borrowing the money for shorter term, less costly projects that possibly have shorter useful lives. The thing to keep in mind, we did establish a fund balance goal for this fund. This is not particularly a city policy, but we do like to look at it. For capital project funds, and to use the technical finance term, they tend to be bumpy. You have, larger capital projects in one year, you may spend several $1 million, the following year spend only $100,000, and the following year $1 million. And so we like to smooth that out by using a 5-year average, and then we take 35% of that 5-year average. So that's what that orange line is. And essentially what we like to see over time is that ending fund balances, those blue bars, are generally above that orange line. And that's how we solve for the financial needs of the fund. So we look at how much money should you have in the fund in any given year, and then what is the capital activity and revenue sources available to that fund. And then we figure out how to make the whole thing work, either based on using debt or potentially property taxes, or in the case of this particular fund, both. The one thing I would note though is that we, for fund balance purposes, we did exclude the public safety facility because it did tend to skew what those numbers would look like using the property tax because it's so large. But generally what you can see is that right now, if this were to happen, and the city were to spend this amount of money and issue the amount of debt with the caveat provided for having to actively monitor the debt limits over time, you can see that it generally performs well with those adjustments. Of course, the council can always take the decision to not do some of these capital projects, and then we would have to adjust the financial plan. One thing I should mention, when we look at these individual funds, Ellers really makes no opinion about whether or not you should do the capital projects. We take cue from council and staff, like reaching back to my earlier slide, look at your plans, and then we figure out the revenue requirements to meet that plan. If you're uncomfortable with these revenue requirements, meaning you don't want the additional levy or the amount of debt, or you're not interested in certain capital projects, you can certainly amend those plans and we can update the FAQ accordingly. But it's not our position to opine on whether or not you should do a particular street project or a particular building project. That's really up to the elected officials, and of course, they're really right that you rely on staff and other consultants.
Would this be a good time to ask when we can expect solid numbers on our safety center?
Well, until it goes out to bid, Dan, we won't know what actual numbers are. Right now,
When is that gonna happen?
well, yeah, you have to wait until the reverse referendum has been filed, so we'd have to wait till after that, so we wouldn't know, because we have to have a source to pay for it if we put it out to bid.
Well, when we approved funding up to such and such a 65 million, then that would signal that we have funding in place, so we could go and get bids.
So the process would go as we have an engineer estimate, and that's that engineer estimate that we've been working on, right? And then, and so then that's 61.5, I believe is what we have. We allowed or authorized up to 65 million. So what would happen next is continue the work with finalizing the documents, or the construction documents, and then authorize staff to go out to bid. And that's when we put it up to the market to say, somebody bid on this project, they bid on it, and then that's when we have the number. And then the council would say, we authorize the bid, or we accept the bid, and then move forward with the construction. But we can't get to that step because we have to have a funding source. Our funding source was the general obligation funding, using that tool. And that is subject to a reverse referendum, which has been filed. So we can't get to that next step now to really test it. What Dan is providing in here is the top number of 65 million. He's saying probably a year later, right? So you better add the, for planning purposes, you better add the 3% or 4% to that 65 million, so you can have the right number in the plan.
How can we give a proper estimate to our taxpayers to vote on something if we ourselves don't know what it is? We're just asking them to trust us that it's gonna be 65 million when we're, you know, I don't know how many times I've been assured that the process of right sizing this, what can we do without if that's too much money? When do we get to do that?
So,
When do we can look at this?
so we have been looking at it. We had a meeting a couple weeks ago that said, you know, what would we want to take off to trim it here or there? With that is, we're at 61. That is the number that we're at with what the need is. Unless we make some substantial change in design, or make substantial change in not building it to what we need, that is what the estimated number is. The only way that we can truly get the right number is to have it go out to a bid. But right now, just like when Sean says, I got an estimate, you know, engineer estimate to do a street, the bids might come higher or lower than that, but we're just putting together that engineer estimate.
Right, and at this point, the language in the referendum has to reflect what the resolution stated was authorization of $65 million.
Up to.
So we can decide we're gonna spend $50 million, but the referendum will still have to reauthorize the city to spend that amount.
It's true, but if we don't go out with an accurate estimate, that in my opinion is right size, we're gonna end up with nothing.
Well, that's a conversation.
So, do we want something or nothing? Something might not be perfect and ideal, exactly what we want, but nothing's even worse. So if we go out for an approval up to 65 million, the constituents are going, well, up to 65, they don't have an alternative. It's either 61.5 or nothing. I'm afraid we're getting nothing. Just in the scuttlebutt that I've heard and the people that I talked to, there isn't anyone that disagrees we need to do something. But there's almost a unanimous consent that 65 is too much.
I think
Unless we go up there with an option, and I'm saying, when can we talk about that? When do we have to decide, is nothing is better than something? When can we get together? You know, because right now, the public is gonna view this as all public knowledge, and say, yeah, they're just going in with 65 million. I wanna look at alternatives to where we can go in and get something done. Again, it might not be ideal what we want, we don't wanna stay where we're at, we can't stay where we're at. So when is that discussion? And by the way, I thought Chris was rather flippant at that last meeting, Chris from ICS, when I said, what, you know, when do we, you know, because he's one of them that always said, we're gonna right size this, or we can look at this, or whatever, give and take. I thought he was rather flippant when I asked him about it, and he said, what do you want to cut out? I'm just a knucklehead, how would I know what the chief would want to cut out? Or the chief, second in command chief would want to cut out? And, you know, I don't know that to tell him that. But I really think this has gotten to be a little bit of a railroad job to where we gotta be able to tell our constituents exactly what we're thinking. If we can't provide an alternative, I'm afraid we're getting nothing.
So Dan, a couple of things. One, we've been working on this for several years.
Yes,
Many
I
people have been
don't
working on it,
disagree with
including you and many people on this council. We've rolled up our sleeves. We've tried this, we've tried that. This is Plan B. This is Plan C.
Okay,
But if I can just continue with this for a second, give me a second here. So just like Dan can only give us a financial management plan of what we
Sure.
put in and what numbers we have. Chris from ICS can only design a building for what we put in and we say it. It's not Chris telling us what we need. It's our fire staff, it's our police chief, it's them, it's us saying, this is what we need in this building. This is what Owatonna needs. Now if Burnville or Lakeville might have looked at theirs, but this is what we need to do, to run a police station. We need the alleyways, we need the victim rooms, we need those decontamination spaces, we need the living quarters. That's what we need to run Owatonna's police department. So Chris is not telling us, hey, you should add this, you should add that. He's just doing whatever we tell him to do. So how do we right size it? So in some ways, he is telling us, well, what do you want out? Do you not want a 75 or 100-year building? We can build you, I forgot what they're called, I'll just call it a pole ship. Then he'll design that for us. So he's only doing what we're asking him to do. But we've asked him to design us a building for multi-generations. Just like we have down at the current one, that's 118 years old. We got 118 years out of that building. So if we don't want that type of, that construction, then we do need to tell Chris, design it for this. But then we're only gonna get probably 25, 30 years out of it. So this is where I think the mayor and a few people have said, we need to decide what we need to do, so staff has the direction on what we need to do. If we don't want this type of a building, then council needs to give direction to me to say, Jenna, design it a different way. But what I've been hearing from council is, we need a police, we need a fire, we don't have any more time left, kick the can long enough. So we as a team need to come together and say, this is our project, and this is the only project that we have going forward. And right now, today, it's $61 million.
but what I've also heard from ICS and staff is, there will be time to discuss this. And if it comes in way too much, then we can scramble.
So that's the bidding component, and that's what Doug says, is if I would get a chance to get it to bid, then we could say, well, we can't afford that, or we won't do this, but we didn't get it to bid.
Without a second proposal. Okay.
So you're saying we should have a plan
Without a
B?
second
We don't have a
proposal.
plan B, Dan. We don't have a plan B. I mean, just being
How much
honest.
longer can you live there, chief? How much longer can you live there? And we're overdue already. And I think it's stupid. I'm sorry, my opinion is that's too much money, and it's not gonna pass. That's my opinion. So then my question is, can be all the people that vote no, what's your plan? And they look at me just like I felt with Chris. I said, well, we're not, I mean, so we know that's too much money. We're not gonna pass that. Then what do we do? Then, what? Appointment A?
Well, I think the hardest part about this at this point is we are gonna have to be very proactive in, there again, if we know it's $61 million, demonstrating why it makes sense for us to spend the amount of money. And I agree with you, Dan, it's a lot of money, I would rather not spend that much money. We have to do something, we definitely do something. But if we go into it at this number, you might be right, they might fail. So the only other thing we could do is come at it and say, okay, we think we've created a scenario, we can do this for $55 million. And we have to tell the constituents, you're voting on this resolution for $65 million, but we are telling you, we think we can do it for $55 million. They'll have to vote for 65.
Wishes and, you know, if, wishes were horses, beggars would ride, right? But we tell our constituents that we can do better. And they're going, you ain't doing better. We know government. You ain't doing better. And that's what's out there right now. You know, I just think that we have to have something else to offer us, just like when we go for a sales tax to help support the community center. Better have 2 or 3 on that list so that they can vote no on 1 or 2. Right, if you go with 1 item for whatever the community center is gonna cost. Our consultant said it's not gonna go. You better have 2 or 3 things for them to vote on, because they want to vote no on something. And I don't know, I might be an outlier on the council, but I would sure like to have a meeting amongst us and whoever else wants to be there. Exactly the way forward.
Reverse referendum doesn't give option A, B, and C.
But if we can come out with the public and say, we've already come out and said 61 million. So why can't we come out with saying, hey, we're cutting back and we're only gonna be 40 million?
And I will add to that, Dan, I had that conversation with some of the people getting the petition, and I said, how much would be the correct amount? And I was told, well, the amount of money you want to spend might be right. That might be the amount of money we should spend. They simply want it demonstrated to them more clearly that it makes sense. So they have told me that even the amount of money we're asking, which I agree with you is a lot, and I would like it to be less, they've said that might be the right amount of money. So it's on us a little bit to just demonstrate that that is the appropriate amount of money for what we need. Because they have told me that if that could be the right amount, they just want to demonstrate it a little more clearly. So,
I agree.
And I think as a council, we need to, if we're committed to this, we need to sell it. But I wouldn't expect Jen to go out with the flag and we're set back to going, go for it. I mean, I understand the point, it's expensive, but if I were looking at
It's
something.
not the money might be right, and we might be able to explain it to them. But are the majority of people gonna vote for it?
Well, again, I think that's what.
That's my question. We need to do something. Is the majority going to vote for it? And right now, I'm saying, what I'm hearing is no.
So we got a lot of, the reverse referendums out there. And whether we do it in August or November, that's gonna be the people. And I would hate to go, okay, it's $40 million, and we're going, it's a 15-year building for you, and it's a 10-year building for you. And somebody's gonna come back just like Dan has done and said, wait 1 year, you're adding another $3 million. And why would you do that? I look at it just like at the high school. They kicked the can down the road and they built the pods and they threw good money after bad to extend that building for about 2-3 years. I was involved in the design of the windows. And we told them up front, this is not going to work.
But look back at why that happened. We needed the space, we needed to do something. We picked that to do something. They could not do anything. If they had voted for it, if they'd asked the citizens to vote for a new high school 15 years ago, it wouldn't have made it. So you chose something because what they had was not adequate. And that's what I'm saying, that they have to do something, even though you and I know that it's a fool's errand, but something is better than nothing.
And I hear what you're saying, David. Now, I was on the school board when they voted down the high school 3 times. Finally ended up getting it, but I think the need is there. I think the requirements are needed. And I'm gonna acquiesce to Nate.
So you mentioned the school district, and I'm gonna say that hurt them. I was in the high school when the big renovation happened. That was not meant to be a short-term solution. That was sold as a long-term solution for the high school. And then 10 years later, we're looking for a new school. I mean, if we demonstrate this is a long-term plan, it makes way more sense. There's definitely a bad taste in mouths because of that. I mean, there was a proposal to offload the old school before the bond was even paid off. So people were like, well, this was long-term. It lasted 10 years, and we're back asking again. So I think we really have to do a good job of demonstrating that. We don't want to be in this situation again, where a bunch of money was spent in a facility as a long-term solution and ended up being a short-term solution.
Being good stewards of taxpayer dollars, again, does not mean spending as little money as possible.
Right.
It's spending responsibly, and I get what you're doing, and I absolutely get what you're doing. But we don't know what the result of the reverse referendum is. Are the voices saying no the strongest? Yes. But there's a whole lot of people that would probably not do it. We don't know what the result is.
I agree.
And a lot of people that signed that petition have gone and said that they didn't sign it because they're against it. They signed it because they just wanted to have a voice in it, and they wanted it to go to the vote. So we don't know what the result is. We can't.
Which I don't like that the newspaper said petitioners are saying no.
Right.
That's not necessarily what that means. Just because you signed it doesn't mean you're against it.
Correct.
So there's some nuance.
No doubt. It's a referendum, it's a grassroots democracy. I just know we need to do something, and I don't want to price ourselves out.
Neither do we, Dan. And you've been on these committees, you've been in there, and we are doing our best to keep the costs down, be reasonable. That's why we're reusing our city land, right? I mean, like, we have made some real decisions to keep that cost
I
down.
agree with everything. I agree with everything everyone is saying.
And I need you to
It's
please
just a
swear here.
caveat.
And that's where, I respectfully disagree with you, Dan. We toured these facilities and we put our faith in Chief Mondale and his staff, and Chief Hoffman and his staff. How we rate sizes for Owatonna. What we have in place is what they feel is right size for Owatonna. They're the experts. And I have to put my faith and trust that with their expert opinion, that's what they believe, what we need for today and for the future.
I concur with you, Kevin. Nobody wants to work in a space that is being used, not a great environment. I don't want to say hazardous, but we need to take that into consideration. I should. I mean, I've spent a little bit of time, let's say, not in the jail. But that environment is very difficult for the officer at best. And how do we expect our employees, which we value, we go through all these things, and then we put them in a workspace that is substandard? I mean, that to me is not a very good way for the council. Again, I understand, it's a lot of money, but what is it? I do have to comment on one thing. Jenna did an interview with one of the TV stations from the cities, and we said 65 million. Oh, that's one station. No, that's both. And they went, really? Owatonna is very conservative. Again, I was on the school board when we went out 3 times with it, this one we got. And I think it was because of me, I got off and it. Maybe I gotta get off and you guys can pass, but I think in order for us to walk the talk, we need to do this. And go out and let the public vote, yes or no vote, we move forward. But how can we look at these people in front of us and go, we're committed to
So one of our values is, I think it's probably in our wording, it says, if it's worth doing, let's do it right. I don't think this project has, I mean, that is about as core as you can get to this. If it's worth doing, again, let's do it right.
And I wrote down on, survey about economic sustainability, was that after some discussion like what we just had?
Yeah, we had it on March 19th, we had a good discussion there at our retreat, of how committed we were to the police and fire station. It's number one of our focus for the next 3 years. And the civility test is to that, saying we're gonna agree to something, we can have our difference of opinions, but when we agree to, say, 65 million going forward, we're committed to doing that as a team, I think is what I heard from you.
Were you up?
I was just gonna add, the public in general, they want good services, police and fire, of course, city services. Now, what I will say is, if Jeff tells me this design, this is what we need, I trust Jeff. You know, if the fire department says this is what we need, I trust the fire department. Do I trust the consultants as much? I do not. We have had consultants in the past, we have had projects go, and we get it all done, and go, this is what they do, how did this not function properly? So I trust our local staff, that if they tell us what we've designed is what we need, great. If someone else from the outside is telling us this is what we need, I'm gonna be a little more skeptical. So if you guys tell me, you know what, this is the thing they put in, we could do without it, I'm like, great. And if you say, you know what, it's designed exactly the way we need it, I'm gonna support you. But I do want you guys to be the ones determining that. I don't want an outside consulting firm or an architect or somebody else telling us, this is what we think you need. Because I don't trust that nearly as much.
So we purposely put staff teams
Yeah.
on this. Chief, you want to comment on it? I mean, you've been involved since day one.
Right, so this isn't, when I came into this design, it wasn't that I said, we need a 55,000 square foot building. I didn't know what the scope was gonna be. All we did is when we worked with our consultants, and then the engineers and the architects, we went on our tours. It's like, we're operating out of a commercial bank building. If we wanna operate out of a police station and function like a police department, these are the things that we need. And then the tours kind of reflected on that, and it helped shape our consultants. And then they delivered this package with the design features that we need. And so then it ended up being 55,000 square feet. Now, if we start trimming back on this, I would say we're gonna be asking to remodel, add on in, what is it, 10, 15, 20 years? So I think, if you're looking for an opinion, I think this is scoped for the future. We're not looking to try to add on to this thing for the future. It's scoped, and it has the necessary programming needs that we need to function. So, I didn't know that it was gonna end up to be 55,000 square feet. You know, but that's what it is, and then to Councilmember Dotson's point, I need to then trust the consultants and the design architects.
And like I said, if you are exercising a level of scrutiny with them, because they have a vested interest in, you know, they get paid a percentage. So, but if you look at it and you're comfortable with it, I trust you guys and what you need. But if there's opportunities, great. If there's not, I'm okay with that. But I don't want it to be one of those situations where down the road, you're having to ask again. I'd like to do it right the first time. I just want to ensure that doing it right is what we're doing.
My turn now?
Your turn.
Dan doesn't even get to talk, this is his time. He's gonna listen.
I hear a few things, a couple of things I want to reiterate. I think Nate was talking about a lot of people sign that petition because they want to have a say in what happens. I think that's great. I think we should embrace that. And I think that gives us 6 months to explain to people why this is a good, well thought out plan. It's a good investment for the future. And throwing it down to your kids and your grandkids 20 years from now is not a good plan. In fact, it got thrown down to us from 20 and 30 years ago, and somebody's gonna have to step up to it and do it. So the referendum's great. Now we'll get into it for the entire town, and I think as a group, we should embrace that and say, you know what? We got an excellent plan. Here's why. and do our best to get a yes vote. And I think everybody here plays a role in it. And it's a great plan. I've been involved with it for 4 years, probably. And the fact that we can get the entire community to vote on it and hopefully say yes is even better to me. So that's it.
I'm hungry.
And can we take a break? Is this okay to take a break and we can maybe come back with our theme?
Every dance gonna be done short.
You think I'm the same between them and lunch?
I would rather not have a working lunch because we've got staff that has to reply to emails, they've got to make phone calls, and so I think we owe it to them to do their business. We kind of promised them they would do that with time to do your business, so.
I think we better get Burbank. Let's go. Should we say 25 minutes?
New business Tuesday.
125. 125.
No limit for what?
Dan, I'm not far behind you.